The night was silent, but the silence was not peaceful. It was the silence of death. The silence of a frozen world. Snow covered everything. Endless white that stretched as far as the eye could see. The wind screamed across the plains like a wild beast, sharp and merciless. Every gust of air felt like a knife against the skin. Captain Ryan stumbled through the storm, his breath turning into ice before his face. His ship had fallen from the sky only hours ago, crashing into this dead planet. The wreckage burned behind him, a faint orange glow fading against the storm. But the fire was dying fast, and with it his only chance of warmth. He could not stay there. He had to move, or he would freeze. Ryan's boots sank deep into the snow, each step heavier than the last. His body shivered under his broken armor, the metal plates covered in frost. He could feel his heartbeat slowing, his fingers going numb. The cold was not just outside. It was inside him, crawling into his chest. He knew if he stopped moving, even for a moment, he would not rise again. Ahead through the blinding snow, he saw a shape. It looked like a shelter, half buried in ice. His heart gave a weak spark of hope. He pushed forward, falling to his knees more than once, but he dragged himself closer. Closer until the shadow became real. The shelter was small, made of steel plates bent and broken. It looked like an outpost abandoned long ago. One wall had collapsed, snow pouring inside. But the roof was still standing, and he could see a faint light within. Someone had been here, maybe was still here. Ryan reached the doorway, his breath ragged. The storm screamed behind him, but inside was calmer. He pushed through the broken door and collapsed on the frozen floor. His chest heaved as he gasped for air, his vision swimming for a moment. He thought he was safe, then he heard it. A sound, low and steady like breathing. Ryan's eyes snapped open, his hand reaching for the blaster at his belt. He froze when he saw her in the far corner. Standing like a shadow in the dim light was an alien woman. Her skin was pale with a faint blue glow. Her hair long and dark, braided with silver threads. Her eyes burned with golden light, sharp and unblinking. She wore cracked armor of black metal, marked with strange symbols, and in her hand, she held a weapon glowing faintly in the dark. Ryan pulled his blaster, weak but ready. The alien woman stepped closer. Her movements slow, controlled. She did not attack, but she did not lower her weapon either. The storm howled outside, but inside the room was filled with a heavier silence. For a long moment they only stared at each other. Two enemies caught in the same trap. Ryan's thoughts raced. He had seen her kind before, on battlefields across the stars. Her people were enemies of humanity. Killers, ruthless in every war, and now one stood in front of him. Breathing the same air, trapped in the same storm. Fate had thrown them together in the cold heart of nowhere. The alien woman finally spoke, her voice low, strange but clear. "Only one bed," she said, her breath a mist in the air. Her words cut through Ryan like ice. He glanced at the back of the shelter and saw it. A single bed. Metal frame half buried under blankets. It was the only warmth in this frozen tomb. Ryan tightened his grip on his blaster, his body trembling from more than the cold. He could not trust her. Every instinct screamed danger. But outside, the storm raged louder, the wind pounding on the walls like a drum. If he stepped outside again, he would die. If he stayed, he would have to share the only bed with the alien. The woman's golden eyes locked on his, unblinking. She spoke again, her voice sharper this time. "You share, or you die." Ryan felt his heart pound against his frozen chest. The choice was simple but deadly. The night was far from over. The storm had trapped them both, and in that frozen shelter, two enemies faced the cold, and each other. The silence returned, but now it was not the silence of death. It was the silence before something dangerous, something unknown. The storm outside roared like a beast, shaking the walls of the broken shelter. Snow slipped through the cracks in the roof, landing in soft piles on the floor. Captain Ryan stood tense, his blaster shaking in his hand, his breath sharp in the frozen air. The alien woman stood across from him, golden eyes glowing in the dark, unblinking. The silence between them was heavier than the storm. She moved first, slow, her steps careful on the icy ground. Her weapon was still in her hand, glowing faintly, but she did not raise it. Ryan's finger hovered over the trigger of his blaster. Every part of him screamed to shoot, to end the threat before it began. But his body was weak, his blood cold, his energy fading with every breath. "You human," the alien woman said, her voice low but sharp. Her words were broken but clear enough. Her breath made mist in the cold air. Curling like smoke, Ryan said nothing, waiting. His eyes locked on hers. Then she pointed toward the back of the shelter. Toward the bed. Only one bed, she said again, her golden eyes burning brighter. Ryan glanced over his shoulder, and there it was, a narrow metal frame covered with blankets that looked worn but thick. The only thing in this frozen room that promised warmth. The alien's meaning was clear. If they both stayed here, they had to share it. Ryan's chest tightened, his pride clashing with survival. Share a bed with her? With an enemy soldier? It was unthinkable. His voice cracked as he spoke. I'll take the floor. But the alien's lips curled, the faintest trace of a smile. You die on floor, she said coldly. Her words like ice. The storm howled louder, wind tearing against the steel walls. The temperature dropped further, the cold biting deeper into Ryan's bones. He looked at his hands. They were pale, shaking, almost useless if he lay on the floor. The frost would swallow him before dawn. He knew she was right, though the truth burned him more than the cold. Ryan lifted his blaster higher, his voice rough. And if I say no? The alien woman tilted her head, her braids sliding across her armor. Her golden eyes never blinked, her voice flat, steady. Then you die alone, she said, as if the words were law. Her hand did not shake, her weapon ready if he moved against her. Ryan's heart pounded, the storm pounding with it. He thought of Earth, of his home, of the battles that brought him here. He thought of every warning about her kind, every story of betrayal and death. And yet here she was, offering not peace but survival. He could not read her, could not trust her. But he could not fight the cold either. His knees weakened, his body almost ready to collapse. He lowered his blaster, the weapon heavy in his frozen hands. The alien's golden eyes followed every movement, sharp and watchful. Ryan forced the words through frozen lips. Fine. We share. The alien woman nodded once. Slow, calm, like a queen giving judgment. She walked past him, closer to the bed. Her armor cracked as she moved, pieces chipped by battle and frost. Ryan watched her, tense, ready for a trick. But she only set her weapon against the wall, leaning it within reach. Then she sat on the edge of the bed, her breath steady, her eyes never leaving him. Ryan stayed by the doorway, fighting his fear, fighting his pride. The cold pressed harder, creeping into his chest. His legs trembled, and he finally moved. Dragging himself toward the bed, every step felt like surrender. But he had no choice. He sat down on the edge. His blaster still in his lap, the alien spoke again. Softer this time, almost like a warning. You trust me little, I trust you little. But storm worse than us both. Her golden eyes flicked toward the wall, where the wind howled and the snow piled higher. Ryan said nothing, but he knew her words were true. Outside was death, inside was danger, but at least it was danger with warmth. She lay back slowly, pulling the blanket over herself. Her body gave off strange heat. Warmer than any human's, Ryan hesitated, then slid under the blanket beside her. Their shoulders touched, and he flinched, feeling her strength even in stillness. The alien closed her eyes, calm, as if sleep could come even now. Ryan stared at the roof, the storm hammering above. His grip on the blaster loosened, his body sinking into exhaustion. But his mind would not rest, not with her so close. He wondered if he would wake at all, or if her blade would end him in the night. The storm outside screamed, but inside the silence grew heavier. The frozen night was not over. The storm had trapped them together, forced them into the same breath, the same bed, two enemies bound not by trust, but by the cruel hand of survival. And as Ryan's eyes finally closed, he felt the weight of her heartbeat beside him, steady, strong in the dark of the frozen world. The storm still raged outside, the wind slamming against the steel walls like a hammer. Inside the shelter, the silence between man and alien grew heavier. The single bed creaked as both lay tense, neither fully asleep, neither fully awake. Ryan's hand rested on his blaster, his finger brushing the trigger even in half-dreams. Beside him, the alien woman breathed steady, calm, her warmth pressing against him like a hidden fire. Time passed slowly, each minute stretching like an hour. Ryan opened his eyes, staring at the broken roof where snowflakes slipped through tiny cracks. He could hear her heartbeat, stronger and faster than a human's. The sound made him uneasy, reminding him that this was no ally, but a sworn enemy, and yet without her body heat, he would already be dead. She shifted, her braid brushing against his shoulder. Ryan tensed instantly, his muscles stiff, his grip on the blaster tightening, but she only moved to sit up. her golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. For a long moment she said nothing. Only studied him then in her broken English. She spoke again, slow and sharp. "You fear me," she said, her breath a thin cloud in the frozen air. Ryan did not answer, but his silence was louder than words. The alien tilted her head, almost curious. "I fear you also," she added. Her tone was not soft, not kind, but it was honest, and for a moment, Ryan felt the first crack in the wall between them. He sat up too, pulling the blanket closer around him. The cold bit at his face the moment he left the warmth. "You've killed humans," Ryan said finally. His voice rough, her golden eyes narrowed. But she did not deny it. "You kill my people also," she replied. Simple as truth. Their words hung heavy in the room. Sharper than blades, neither argued, neither shouted, because both knew it was useless. They were soldiers, trapped by the same storm, bound by the same war, but for now, neither could strike without dooming themselves. It was survival first, hatred second. Ryan leaned back against the steel wall, his body trembling. He watched her remove the cracked pieces of her armor. She unstrapped the chest plate, the shoulder guards, the broken gauntlet. Beneath the black metal was skin marked by scars, deep and old. Wounds from battles across stars he could not imagine. Her body radiated heat even without armor. Ryan could feel it warming the small space. It unsettled him, but also comforted him. He realized her people must have evolved in colder worlds. Heat lived inside them, stronger than any human body could produce. The alien caught his stare and bared her teeth. Not quite a smile, not quite a threat. "You think me beast?" she asked, her voice low. Ryan shook his head, though in truth he wasn't sure. "You saved heat," he said. The words clumsy, almost childish. Her golden eyes softened for the first time. "Though only slightly, my name," she said after a pause, tapping her chest with two fingers. "Kalira?" The name hung in the air, sharp and foreign. Ryan hesitated before answering. "Ryan," he said simply. She repeated it slowly, as if tasting the sound, Rye, and it was strange hearing his name in the mouth of an enemy. For the first time since the crash, Ryan felt the storm fade in his mind. Not the real storm, it still howled outside, but the storm inside him. The chaos of fear and anger softened into a wary calm. He was still trapped, still in danger. But he was no longer completely alone. It was not peace, but it was something close to a truce. The night dragged on, the shelter trembling with each blast of wind. Ryan closed his eyes for a moment, but every sound kept him awake. Kalira sat cross-legged on the bed, sharpening her broken blade with a fragment of steel. Sparks flicked into the air, dying quickly in the cold. Her movements were precise, careful, like a ritual she had done 1,000 times. Finally, Ryan spoke again. "Why are you here? Why this planet?" Kalira did not look up, her blade scraping against metal. "Ship fell," she said simply, her voice flat. Ryan frowned, realizing her fate was as bitter as his. Two enemies stranded by the same storm of chance. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying a deep, low sound. It was not the cry of the storm, but something else. Heavier, closer. Kalira froze, her golden eyes flicking toward the door. Ryan sat up fast, gripping his blaster, his pulse racing. The noise came again, a heavy thud in the snow. Slow and steady, something was moving out there. Something large, Kalira whispered in her own tongue. Sharp and tense, Ryan didn't know the words. But he knew the meaning. Danger. They locked eyes. The fragile truce tested by a threat greater than either. The storm had given them one enemy in each other, but the night had brought another. The heavy sound outside came again, slow and crushing. It was like the earth itself was moving. Like something massive dragged across the snow. Ryan gripped his blaster tighter, his pulse racing. Kalira's golden eyes narrowed, her body tense, her hand on her glowing weapon. For a long moment they listened together, their breaths shallow. The noise faded, swallowed by the storm, but the silence left behind was worse. Both knew the thing outside was real, and it was still near, Ryan whispered. "What is it?" Though his voice was almost lost in the wind, Kalira shook her head slowly. "Not storm, not beast, I know," she said. Ryan's skin crawled. He wanted to believe the sound was his imagination, but Kalira had heard it too. She sat still, listening like a hunter waiting for prey. Ryan realized her senses were sharper than his. Trained for survival on worlds harsher than this, she tilted her head, then whispered, "It watch us." The words cut colder than the wind. Ryan's eyes darted to the broken door, where snow hissed against the frame. Something unseen, hiding in the storm, watching the small shelter. He felt the weight of invisible eyes pressing on them both. The storm outside was no longer their worst enemy. Hours passed, the storm refusing to break. Ryan and Kalira stayed alert, their weapons always near. But slowly, their tension shifted into a different silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of people forced too close. The kind of silence that begged to be broken. Ryan leaned back against the wall, his body weak from exhaustion. The cold made his thoughts slow, heavy. He looked at Kalira sharpening her blade again, sparks flashing like fireflies in the dark. Her movements were controlled, almost graceful for the first time. He wondered not what she was, but who. Why fight us? Ryan asked suddenly, his voice rough. Kalira looked up, golden eyes sharp, but she did not strike. She thought for a long moment before answering. My people. Told war is only way, she said. Her English broken, but her meaning clear. War gives honor. War gives place among stars. Ryan felt anger rise in him, anger and confusion. War takes everything, he said, his voice harder. My people die, planets burn, and for what? Kalira's gaze darkened, the blade pausing in her hands. For power, she said coldly. For survival. The words echoed in the small shelter. Ryan thought of Earth, of families hiding in bunkers during alien raids. He thought of soldiers falling beside him, nameless, forgotten in the snow of battlefields. He thought of Kalira sitting here, scars across her body, fighting for survival just as he was. The truth hit him like the storm. Both of them were victims of the same endless war. Kalira lowered her blade. Her voice softer now. You think I want this? She asked, her words thick with something almost human. Ryan stared at her, surprised by the crack in her armor. You follow orders, he said quietly, like me. She nodded once, sharp, but her eyes flickered with pain. For the first time, Ryan saw more than an enemy in her. He saw a soldier, a survivor, a being bound by chains of war too heavy to break. The storm howled outside, but inside a strange warmth grew between them, not trust, not yet, but something different, something fragile, a spark of understanding buried deep in the ice. Kalira finally lay back on the bed, staring at the roof. Storm end, she whispered. Then we fight again, maybe. Her honesty was sharp as her blade. Ryan looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He knew she was right. This truce was only as long as the storm, but as he lay beside her, the thought of raising his blaster against her felt heavier than before. He closed his eyes, but sleep did not come. Instead, he listened to her breathing, steady and calm. Like the heartbeat of the shelter outside, the unseen thing in the storm gave another low sound. Distant but real, Ryan knew the true test was coming soon. Secrets had been shared in the dark. Not enough to erase the past, but enough to plant doubt in the heart of hatred. Ryan and Kalira were still enemies, but the line between enemy and ally was no longer clear. In the frozen shelter, with death outside, two soldiers carried the same truth. Sometimes survival demands more than war. It demands trust. The storm did not end, it only grew heavier. Snow slammed against the shelter like waves against a sinking ship. Inside, Ryan and Kalira sat in silence, their weapons ready, but their eyes kept drifting to the broken door, where the sound had come from. The sound of something huge moving in the storm. Ryan could not shake the feeling of being hunted. Every breath felt watched, every heartbeat felt counted. Kalira's golden eyes never left the entrance. Her hand rested on her glowing blade, fingers twitching at every gust of wind. It was not fear in her eyes, but sharp readiness. The eyes of a predator sensing another predator. Hours stretched, but the storm never gave peace. Ryan's body ached with exhaustion, his chest heavy with cold. Yet even his sleep pulled at his mind. His grip on the blaster never loosened. Kalira stood suddenly, her braid snapping behind her like a whip. Her head tilted, listening, every muscle in her body alive. What is it? Ryan whispered, his voice almost lost in the roar. She raised her hand, silencing him with a sharp gesture. Then they both heard it. A deep growl, muffled by snow, but close, too close. The sound made the steel walls vibrate, made Ryan's teeth rattle in his skull. Something circled the shelter, heavy steps crushing ice and bone beneath. Ryan's throat went dry. What? What is out there? He asked, his voice trembling. Kalira answered in her own language, words sharp and guttural. Then in broken English she said, Hunter. Big hunter. The word was enough to make Ryan's blood freeze colder than the storm. A shadow moved past the doorway, huge, blocking what little light the storm gave. Ryan held his breath, his blaster raised. Kalira crouched low, ready to strike, her golden eyes blazing. The growl came again, this time louder, vibrating through the floor. Snow spilled inside as something massive pressed against the shelter wall. The steel groaned, bending under the weight. Ryan's heart pounded. He imagined claws tearing through. Jaws breaking the door, Kalira hissed under her breath. Her weapon glowing brighter. The beast outside circled again. Its movement slow, patient. It was testing them, feeling the walls, waiting for weakness. Then the scratching began. Long claws dragging against the steel. The sound was worse than the storm. A scream of metal and hunger. Ryan gritted his teeth. The noise stabbing into his skull, Kalira whispered. "It smell us," her voice tight with tension. Ryan could almost see the creature's nose pressed against the cracks, breathing them in. The bed shook as the wall shuddered again. Ryan felt the floor tilt slightly, snow piling against the weak structure. "Shelter won't hold," Kalira said, her voice flat and certain. Ryan's stomach twisted. "Then what do we do?" Her golden eyes flicked to him, fire burning in the cold. "We fight," she said simply. As if it was the only choice, Ryan swallowed hard, nodding despite the fear clawing at his chest. He checked his blaster. Half power left, maybe enough for one fight. Kalira tightened the strap on her cracked armor, scars glowing faintly under her skin. Both soldiers, enemies bound by war, now forced to fight side by side. The beast outside gave a roar, shaking snow from the roof. It was not the roar of an animal. It was the roar of a monster born to kill. Ryan's ears rang, his chest shook. The shelter walls bent inward, Kalira snarled back, a sound that made even Ryan's blood stir for one moment. He saw not an enemy but a warrior standing with him. The claws tore through the wall, metal shrieking as pieces fell to the ground. A massive hand covered in ice and scales pushed inside. Ryan fired, blue light blasting the arm, the smell of burned flesh filling the air. The beast roared in pain, pulling back, but it was not retreating. It was angry and it wanted blood. Kalira leapt forward, her glowing blade cutting across the crack in the wall. Sparks and snow burst around her. The weapon slicing steel like paper, Ryan fired again, the blaster's heat cutting through the storm. The shelter shook harder, snow pouring in as the beast rammed it. The ceiling cracked, pieces of ice falling on their heads for a moment. Ryan thought the shelter would collapse, burying them alive, but the walls held barely. Groaning like a dying creature, Kalira fell back beside him, her chest heaving, her golden eyes wild. "This fight now," she said through gritted teeth, her voice like fire. Ryan nodded, his blaster humming weakly in his shaking hands. Outside, the beast roared again, closer than before. The sound of claws against steel filled the air like thunder. The storm itself seemed to bow before the monster. Ryan and Kalira stood together, weapons ready, hearts pounding. Two enemies forced into an uneasy alliance, facing death in the snow. And as the wall bent inward one final time, Ryan realized something chilling. The storm was not their prison anymore. The real danger was here, alive, hungry, and breaking through the walls. The shelter screamed as metal tore apart. Snow burst inside like a wave, blinding and cold. The beast forced its way through the broken wall, its massive body pushing against steel. Ryan staggered back, his blaster shaking in his hands. Kalira stood tall, her glowing blade humming with fire against the storm. The creature was bigger than Ryan had imagined. Its body was covered in thick scales of black ice. Its jaws were lined with teeth longer than his hand. Golden eyes glowed from its skull, filled with hunger and fury. The storm itself seemed to follow it. The air freezing around its every step, Ryan fired first, the blaster's blue beam cutting across the beast's shoulder. The shot burned, but it did not stop. The monster roared, snow whipping through the shelter, tearing blankets and plates of steel. Kalira leapt forward, her blade slicing into its arm. Sparks and frost flying, the beast howled, swiping at her with claws sharp as swords. She moved fast, rolling under its strike, her braid snapping behind her. Ryan fired again. Aiming for its head, the blast hit, but the creature's skull was thick, the shot only making it angrier. It turned toward him, jaws snapping, teeth crashing shut with the sound of bone breaking. Ryan stumbled back, the wall pressing cold against his back. Kalira screamed in her language, a war cry that shook the air. She struck again, her blade cutting deep into the monster's leg. Black blood sprayed across the snow, sizzling where it touched the ground. The beast swung its tail. Massive and heavy, it slammed into Kalira, throwing her across the shelter, crashing into steel. Ryan shouted her name without thinking. His chest burning, he raised his blaster. Firing 3 times in a row, the beast staggered, smoke rising from its wounds, but it did not fall, it only roared louder. The roof cracked above them, snow pouring down like sand in an hourglass. Kalira rose again, blood on her lips but fire in her golden eyes. She rushed back into the fight, her body moving like lightning. Her blade flashed, cutting through the creature's chest. Glowing against the ice, Ryan joined her, blasting into its side, the smell of burned flesh filling the air. Together they struck, 2 enemies fighting as one. The monster lashed out, claws slashing across Ryan's armor. The metal cracked, pain shooting through his chest. He fell back coughing, snow filling his mouth. Kalira jumped onto the beast's back, driving her blade deep into its neck. The creature thrashed, roaring, crashing into the walls, shaking the whole shelter. Ryan forced himself up, his blaster almost empty. He aimed at the crack in the beast's chest where Kalira's blade had struck. With a final shot, he pulled the trigger. The blast hit true, exploding against the wound. The monster shrieked, the sound tearing through the storm. It staggered, collapsing to its knees. Kalira ripped her blade free. Black blood sprang across the snow. Ryan fired the last of his power into its skull. The beast let out one final roar before falling, shaking the ground as it crashed down. Silence followed, broken only by the storm. Ryan collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. His body ached. His chest burned, his strength fading. Kalira dropped beside him, her blade still glowing faintly. Her golden eyes looked at him not as an enemy, but as a survivor. "You fight strong," she said, her voice rough. Ryan coughed, forcing a weak laugh. "Couldn't have done it alone." The alien gave a short nod. Almost like respect, the storm still howled outside. But inside the shelter there was a strange quiet. The monster's body lay still, dark blood spreading across the snow. It was dead. But the fight had left scars on both of them. Kalira touched her ribs, wincing. Her armor cracked beyond repair. Ryan pulled his hand away from his chest, blood staining his glove. They were alive, but barely. The bed was half buried in snow, the blankets torn and soaked, their last warmth gone, stolen by the storm and the battle. For a long moment, they just sat there, breathing hard. 2 warriors who should have killed each other long ago, yet now they had saved each other. Their lives bound by the fight. Ryan's eyes met Kalira's, and for the first time he did not see an alien. He saw a soldier, scarred and tired. Just like him. The storm roared, shaking the broken shelter. But Ryan no longer felt completely alone in the dark. They had fought the beast together, and they had survived. And in that frozen wasteland, survival was stronger than hate. The uneasy truce had become something more, forged in battle and blood. The beast was dead, its massive body filling half the shelter. Black blood froze as it touched the snow, hardening like glass. The air was thick with smoke and the bitter smell of burned flesh. Ryan leaned against the cracked wall, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Kalira stood over the monster, her blade dripping dark fluid, her golden eyes glowing in the storm's dim light. Silence pressed down again, but it was a different silence. Not the silence of waiting, not the silence of fear. It was the silence that came after survival, heavy and strange. Ryan coughed, his hand pressing against the wound under his armor. Blood stained his glove, warm against the cold night. Kalira turned to him, her eyes sharp. "You hurt," she said. Her voice low, Ryan gave a weak smile. "You're not exactly fresh yourself." She glanced at the cuts on her arms, the blood seeping through cracked armor. But she only shrugged, as if pain was nothing new to her. The bed was ruined, blankets torn apart, snow covering the frame, their only comfort stolen in the fight. The cold crept back into the shelter, sharper now without the beast's heat. Ryan shivered, his breath a mist, his body trembling. Kalira noticed, her golden eyes narrowing as she studied him. Without a word, she dragged part of the monster's hide away. The black scales cracked like stone, but still held heat from the fight. She dropped it beside him, a strange gift. Ryan frowned, confused. But when he touched it, warmth spread faintly through his hand. He looked at her, surprised. But she only turned away, as if embarrassed. She sat down across from him, her blade resting at her side. The storm still screamed outside, rattling the shelter like a drum. But inside there was a moment of calm, fragile but real. Ryan broke the silence first, his voice rough. "Why help me?" Kalira's golden eyes flicked up, sharp but thoughtful. "You fight like warrior," she said simply. "Not run, not cry, fight." Ryan gave a dry laugh, shaking his head. "Where I come from, running isn't much of an option either," he said. She tilted her head. studying him like she was trying to see his soul. Then she leaned closer, her voice quieter. Maybe human, not weak, not all. The word struck him harder than he expected. He had always been told her kind saw humans as prey, as children stumbling in a war too big. Yet here she was, giving him respect. It felt strange, almost dangerous, but it also lit something inside him, a spark against the endless cold. His strength faded, his body heavy. He slid lower against the wall. His eyes fighting to stay open, Kalira moved closer, the warmth of her body pushing against the freezing air. Sleep, she said firmly. I watch. Her tone left no room for argument. Ryan hesitated, his pride resisting, but exhaustion crushed him. Slowly he closed his eyes, though his hand still held the blaster against his chest. The storm's roar faded into a dull hum. Kalira sat still, her golden eyes fixed on the door. Her blade glowed faintly, her body a wall of heat beside his. Time passed. Though Ryan could not measure it, he stirred once, half dreaming. He felt Kalira shift beside him, adjusting the blanket she had pulled from the wreckage. Her warmth spread across his frozen body. For the first time since the crash, he did not feel death waiting at his shoulder. Kalira glanced at him in the dim light. His face was pale, lips cracked from cold, yet he breathed steady now. She studied him with quiet focus. This human was different. Stubborn but strong, fragile but unbroken. For reasons she did not name, she did not hate him as much anymore. The storm raged, snow piling higher against the walls, but inside 2 warriors sat close, sharing more than just heat. They shared fire, one from her body, one from his spirit, an unspoken bond forged in battle. Raw and fragile, neither trusted fully, but both knew they needed each other. When Ryan opened his eyes again, hours later the storm still screamed, but he felt something different, something new. His chest still hurt. His body still ached, but warmth lingered beside him. Kalira was still awake, golden eyes glowing. Watching him and the door both, she had not slept, not once. You're still here, Ryan whispered, his voice weak. Kalira tilted her head, her braid shifting against her shoulder. Storm not over, she said simply. Fight not over. Ryan nodded slowly, his heart beating heavy but calmer. For the first time he believed her outside. The storm had not given up, but inside the broken shelter a strange fire burned. 2 enemies who should have killed each other now sat together in survival. The night had not broken them. The beast had not broken them. And in the cold silence, trust began to grow like a hidden flame.